Hello, everyone, and welcome back to another episode of The Push with Nick and KP. We are back once again to bring you a PLE reactions video, this time for NXT Stand and Deliver, which took place in St. Louis, Missouri. Per usual, we'll go through every single match that took place at this event, kind of give you our thoughts and opinions on each one, and then give you our thoughts and opinion on the card overall as a whole. So without further ado, let's go ahead and get into the first contest of the evening, which has Lola Vice going up against Kendal Gray, going up against Jacy Jayne for the Women's NXT Championship. KP, how'd you rate this one?
Yeah, we kickstart the night with probably one of the most talked about stories going into this Stand and Deliver, based on all the controversy that happened on NXT this past week. And we started off in a pretty solid way, to be fair. I thought this was a pretty fun triple threat matchup, pretty good throughout the entirety of the contest. There was a slight little issue that did take place on a couple of occasions towards the late stages of the matchup. For those that are watching this one, sort of like on a broadcast, we did have some black screens and things like that going on down. We won't really get too much into that one, but it did sort of disrupt the viewing in bits. So I think it does need to be mentioned at least a little bit. But despite that, I think that, the match still stayed very competitive, went extremely back and forth. There was so much going on throughout the matchup, just in general. And I think each woman really had the chance to sort of like go into their arsenals and really just like delve down and just to try and impress sort of thing. So we did see a little bit of everybody, which is quite nice. Fallon Henley, Lainey Reed, Ren Sinclair, they're all at ringside here representing and, supporting their, individual superstars in the ring. And we do see at one point towards the very end of the matchup where Fallon Henley and Lainey Reed are dealt with by Ren Sinclair. That then leaves Jacy Jayne alone for the last couple of minutes. She looks kind of shell-shocked, was sort of like just wondering what the plan is now, how to sort of like, I don't know, just knock herself back into focus and really get back into the ring and to get down with it. And when she does that, we then sort of go towards the late stage of the contest. And basically, the end of this one, we see Lola Vice and Kendal Gray sort of like Lola has a hold on Kendal. Kendal bounces Vice into the top rope, sort of like just bounces off of that and just like jolts backwards. Kendal Gray though ducks underneath her herself, avoiding the contact with the rope. And then Jacy Jayne hits the rolling encore onto Kendal Gray, which sort of like knocks her down and out of the conversation. Lola Vice, obviously still recovering from the effects of the rope, does sort of like manage to sort of like steady herself here. And once Jacy Jayne turns around, she literally hits Jacy with a spinning back fist. And that would see Lola Vice become the brand new NXT Women's Champion here. A title change to start off the evening, which is a pretty cool result, to be fair. I wasn't expecting this. I thought it might have been Kendal Gray. She had a lot of traction recently, been very impressive. But then again, you look at Lola Vice, who's also been pretty impressive herself. A very consistent, solid performer, one half of the AAA Mixed Tag Team Champions. So now she's a two-time champion, well, a double champion at the same time. So, yeah, I think she's been in NXT for a while. I'd say this is probably quite deserved, to be fair. I'm looking forward to seeing what her run's going to be like. But in terms of this matchup, though, I thought it was pretty good. I think it could have been maybe a little better in parts, but I think it was pretty decent, to be fair, throughout the vast majority. We saw some different styles here working together quite well, and it just was a really nice flowing matchup. I gave it an 8 out of 10, so pretty solid from me. I quite liked it. It was a good opener for sure, and a title change. Big talking point. Nick, what did you make of this one? Triple threat, obviously all three women involved here. Definitely a mix of styles and like mix of sort of like techniques involved. How do you feel like they blended together? I thought it was quite well. What do you think?
Yeah, I thought this one was a pretty good back and forth. Sees all three women holding their own, but in the end, getting a new NXT Women's Champion that have Lola Vice. Kind of mentioned that on the predictions. I didn't think that was going to be the case, but I also am happy for her. She's had some up and downs for sure, and she had been trending the wrong way for a long time, and then recently started to trend back the right way, and then obviously this is the peak of that. So to take out both Kendal and Jacy is no easy task. A couple of nitpicks, obviously the black screen, which you've already hit on. I feel like that did take me out a little bit, and then of course that Ren Sinclair kind of took care of both of the other members of Vital Influence. I thought that was a bit strange, but I guess regardless, it did take a couple of notches off, at least for me. Probably my least preferred winner out of the three, but now I'm kind of hoping for influence to main. I think that would be my main kind of takeaway here. And like I said, also nice to see Lola back on top. She certainly put in the work, and now Kendal, not worried about her. She'll absolutely get her time, probably sooner rather than later. But yeah, pretty good contest, and I would agree with you. A nice little mix of styles here. Didn't quite have what it took to, to get up in the nines for me either. So I did get into giving this one an 8 out of 10. Quality contest. Just feel like it could have been just a little bit better. The next match of the evening has Rayo and Bravo of Los Americanos with the authentic El Grande Americano going up against Brad Baylor and Ricky Smokes of the Vanity Project with Jackson Drake for the NXT Tag Team Championship. KP, how'd you like this one?
Yeah, so this match was quite interesting because I'm pretty sure if I remember rightly, Nick, when we were going through the predictions of this one, I think you might have even called out potentially could have been the match of the night. And looking at my results here and my rating, this actually did come out as my match of the night. So a very, very fun, solid tag team match, this one in particular here. Some really good moments throughout the entire contest. All four men having a chance to shine, to blend together really well, makes a really fun, entertaining contest. And we see like a little bit of drama here and sort of like a little bit of layers to this one via that of the steel plate, which obviously does come to play when we talk about El Grande Americano, Los Americanos, generally speaking, they all tend to use it. So yeah, this one was no different in that sense, but it didn't quite go their way in the end. So we do see the mask being passed around. Oh, sorry, the metal plate being passed around. I'll get into a bit more of that about that in a minute. But yeah, we see some really cool moments in this contest, and it does sort of like highly just, I don't know, way up on that steel plate. That sort of like leads to the closing stages. We see the plate being passed around at ringside earlier in the contest, and then like Los Americanos, they think they've still got it. I think it's Bravo that actually goes for a headbutt, and then afterwards sort of like checks his mask as if to say, "Oh, it's not there anymore, is it? Wait, they got rid of it." So like prior to this one, the mask of Bravo sort of like one of the guys from Vanity Project actually goes into the mask, takes the plate out, and literally just passes it across to Jackson Drake on the outside. We see a little bit of Jackson and El Grande Americano go back and forth, and there's a little bit of a barring between those two. I guess we'll stage at the end where the plate is actually given to Ricky Smokes, and he actually just pops it in his trunks. This is when the headbutt happens from Bravo now on the top rope, going back to the closing stages. And yeah, he makes it realize that he doesn't actually have that plate anymore. Rayo is then shoved off the top rope to ringside, and Vanity Project hit an assisted diving double foot stomp, and that would see them get the victory here and retain their tag team championships. But I think, you're either going to really like Vanity Project or you're either going to really hate them. They've got one of those gimmicks where it's difficult to sort of like be in between. I quite like them. I think they're great. I think they're extremely talented here for a team that's not been in NXT very long. They were obviously involved, doing very well down there, and being sort of like called up to NXT and just doing a great job so far. They're rightfully in that place. They haven't sort of like politics anything in this one. They're just a very solid team, and they're very impressive every time they go out there, and they absolutely killed it as well. As well as did the Los Americanos as well. Just everyone seemed to do really, really well in this match. It was just a great, fun, high octane, fast paced match. Just it never really failed to disappoint. A couple of big moments as well. Obviously, we spoke about the play, but also another one here was Brad Baylor kicking out of the bitter end. That was huge. That was a massive kick out, to be fair. Got a big reaction. Like, I popped for it as well. I thought that might have been it. And we had new tag team champions. But yeah, thankfully it did go the way that I thought it was going to in the predictions. And we do have the Vanity Project retaining. So yeah, I gave it an 8.5. I thoroughly enjoyed this one. I had a really good time watching it. And just, it was a lot of fun for me. Nick, what did you make of it? Was your match of the night as well? Yeah, did it live up to expectations?
While it was a really fun contest, I don't have this one as my match of the night, but no dig towards this match in particular. Just another match I thought was a little better. But all six involved here, kind of all over the place, high flying for days, as you might expect from the two teams involved here. Vanity Project kind of holding their own against the Luchadors, I thought was impressive in its own right. But in the end, the Vanity Project is still able to retain, and still your NXT Tag Team Champions are the Vanity Project. I just thought, just for a moment, I thought that the Rayo and Bravo could kind of make, help bring some eyes down to it. Maybe I'm a bit biased lately because I just love everything Luchador, especially after the AAA acquisition from WWE. Kind of watching that more closely, and just really entertaining product. And obviously this was no exception. But yeah, really fun. And I too had this match as an 8.5 out of 10. But yeah, Vanity Project definitely earns some more respect in my eyes. And I'm more so on the hate side, but I can respect what they do and what they did here in the ring. With that, the the next contest of the evening has Zaria going up against Sol Ruca. Finally, at long last, we get to see this payoff, this story that we thought would never end. It was memeable at this point because every single time we thought we were finally getting it, something would change, or someone would be very forgiving, probably more so than they should have been. But regardless, we finally do get it here on Stand and Deliver, the biggest NXT stage of the year. Safe to say this one had some pretty high expectations from us. KP, did they live up to it for you?
In a way, yeah. I think that with this kind of matchup, this is probably the best build that we had going in the Stand and Deliver. So there was a lot of, high pressure in this one. There was a lot to live up to because we wanted it to be great. Wanted it to do justice to that of what the build suggested it would do. So there was a lot riding on this one. I think they did a pretty good job of doing that as well. There's an aggressive vibe to the contest, and that sort of like takes place especially very early in the matchup where we see Sol Ruca making her entrance. This is after Zaria is already in the ring waiting on Sol Ruca, and Sol literally just does her entrance, sort of like makes her way down the ramp and just immediately just goes in and attacks Zaria straight away. So the aggression is there from the very get-go, which is perfect. That's what you want. They sort of like bring that sort of like heated animosity from the story into the matchup straight away, which is exactly what needed to happen. So I'm glad they did something like that. That was a great decision. And it turns into a very even contest. Both ladies going, very, very close after hitting their finishes. They both kick out of it on each occasion as well, which is quite impressive. We even see Sol Ruca landing a Soul Snatcher onto the steel ramp, which is sort of like quite a cool spot to be fair. Zaria takes it really, really well. There's like a little like I want to almost call it like cinematic. It's like there's a close up on Sol Ruca. She sort of gets back up to her feet and she's like wondering what she's going to be doing next. And we then just see Zaria sort of like rising behind her, which is a really great camera angle. Really love that sort of thing. That was like a sort of like imprinted in my mind after watching that one. And we see the second Soul Snatcher closely afterwards, which Zaria kicks out of. And we also see the F5 as well, which Zaria doesn't quite put Sol Ruca away with. In the very late stages as well, Zaria looks for a Avalanche F5. So this is just after the finisher kick out from Sol Ruca. And Sol fights off Zaria. She then drops Zaria onto the canvas with an Avalanche X Factor, and then she follows up with a third Soul Snatcher of the contest in order to get the victory here. So it took a lot. It wasn't a quick thing. It wasn't like just one finish and done, which is quite good. Want to see a little bit more from this one. How the depth, have the sort of animosity brought into it, and it did that. So that was great to see. But yeah, it's a really good match. The story played into it quite nicely. The feud worked well. I do think that Sol winning doesn't really do too much for Zaria. Sol's got two options here. She either goes to the main roster or she competes for the NXT Women's Championship. We before this night even ends, we already know that she's going to be going one-on-one against Izzy Dame on NXT this coming week. So that's a bit interesting. So I'm thinking maybe, the feud does continue. Zaria doesn't let Sol just go about her business. And hopefully this is just the first of like a set of 3 matches or something like that. But that's maybe just me hoping for something a bit more. But I think they did a good job with this one, but I want to see a little bit more from Zaria especially. It was a good match, but I think it could have been a little bit better in my opinion. Maybe give them like a stipulation contest, no DQs or like no holds bar, whatever, that sort of thing, street fight. You get the message. But yeah, I thought this one was good. I gave an 8 I gave an 8 out of 10. So it was pretty solid. It's just I think I would have liked a little bit more, like an extra layer, just to match the intensity, because it did well. It's just they needed a bit more to play with. Nick, what did you make of this one? How good was it in your opinion? Did it live up to the high standards we were expecting of it? And what about the story going into this one? Did it meet those expectations?
I mentioned that on the predictions video, considering how long the story had been going, for this to kind of be a no stipulation match was a bit surprising. But getting into the actual match here, Sol sprinting down to the ring before the bell even rang, very uncharacteristic of her, but rightfully so. Both of these women are, have just had enough of each other. Zaria kicking out of 2 Soul Snatchers, one of which was off the steel ramp. That was probably the most shocking moment of the night, at least for me. My jaw was on the floor after she kicked out of 2 of those. The second one being or the first one being off the steel ramp. I thought that was pretty impressive. Definitely Zaria, I think, is probably my MVP of the night. Even though she took the loss here, you can kind of see it there in the top left-hand corner and then the bottom right. Sorry, I don't think and I'm glad you mentioned that. I don't think this is the last match because that bottom right photo does not say I'm done with this. I accept defeat. I think they're going to turn Zaria into an absolute monster, and good for her. I think she has a lot of potential. I'm obviously not. It's not a dig on Soul. Everyone knows Soul has a very, very bright future. She shows up and shows out almost on every single occasion. But kind of what I was mentioning on the predictions video, to Zaria to win here would have absolutely boosted her kind of value in the company. So I think we're going to get there. I just don't think we're quite there yet. But I thought this was a really good one. And I think, especially as you kind of mentioned, I don't think this is the last time we'll see that. And so I think this is kind of why they kind of dialed back just a smidge, but I respect it even more because of the kind of the story, and you could feel the animosity throughout the match. And I love when they can have a good match and tell us a story as well. So I don't think we're done from Zaria. I think Zaria is going to get her revenge, and I can't wait to see how she does it. But yeah, I thought this was a lot of fun, and I think did wonders for both the feud. And if this is just the first of say one or two more, say just the best of three, I think we're in for a really fun ride. So really looking forward to that. I guess one 9 out of 10. I thought this one told a really good story, and I really could feel the emotion in the match. And it's not something you see all the time, so I really like this one. 9 out of 10 for me. The next contest of the evening has Johnny Gargano, or Johnny Wrestling, if you will, going up against Myles Borne, who is defending his NXT North American Championship. I think both of us had some high hopes for this one as well. KP, how did this one fare for you?
Yeah, definitely high expectations. Obviously, I'm a massive Johnny Gargano fan. Going back to the whole black and gold era and his original stint in NXT, probably my favorite man to ever have competed in NXT, just because of how much he gave to the brand. But yeah, generally speaking, of this match against Myles Borne, I was expecting quite a lot from this one because both men are just very just very good in-ring talents. They're very consistent. And I think they put on a good matchup together, to be fair. It gave Gargano a chance to show what he can do again. We've seen him, in a very lost state, let's call it that, over the past, number of months. And it's one of those things where they've got something going on. They bring him back to NXT. He becomes Johnny Wrestling, and then we see what happens from here. We were both advocating for him to lose this one, but to find himself doing so. And I think he did that as well. Because, Myles, him getting the victory in this matchup solidifies himself, massively here. He gets a huge win against someone like Johnny Gargano of his caliber. Yeah, and it's just a really good back and forth match, across the contest, both men just fighting in and around the ring, all throughout here. There's quite a bit of aggression going on. There's just definitely different elements to this one. So that's great to see as well. But yeah, Myles capitalizing to get the win. It wasn't sort of like like a dominant display. It was very much a case of just, taking advantage of a situation at the time and just getting the job done, and just happened to be the way to get the win. So yeah, it was just a last ditch effort, but it was a great way of doing it, and it didn't make either man look weak, at the end either. So yeah, that's a solid, way to get the win. And what I mean by that is we see Gargano looking for a second one final beat. He already hit one earlier in the contest, but this time on the entrance ramp. So Myles is on the ramp itself. Myles does knock Gargano down there before he then hits a slingshot Borne again, and then literally follows up with a third and final Borne again immediately afterwards to get that win. So, yeah, it took a fair bit for Myles to get the 1-2-3 here, but it was a good back and forth match. I enjoy this one. We see Candice LeRae getting involved as well. She has a little bit of a interference at one point, sort of like smacking the face of Myles Borne and sort of like knocking him down. Gargano trying to take advantage, but couldn't quite get the job done. So we do see a little bit on the outside as well. So there's an extra little piece involved. But yeah, really good match. I enjoyed this one quite thoroughly. It wasn't amazing, but it was good. It was consistent and good. Post-match, we do see Myles celebrating with the championship. Johnny Gargano and Candice are on the entrance ramp. They're showing respect to each other. A bit of a respective thing at the end of the match up there. And as Myles is sort of like, stood there with his championship, we then see him be blindsided by Dion Lennox of Dark State. And he then hits Myles with a steel chair before just laying him out with a vicious sort of intense beat down in the ring. And sending a message to Myles Borne, basically saying that he is coming after that championship. And he's essentially putting all the Tony D'Angelo stuff behind him. So yeah, quite interesting with that one. Looking forward to seeing what happens from that. I'm guessing I'm going to get a little bit of Myles and Lennox going forward. So yeah, already our next challenger has sort of like made himself apparent. So yeah, it was a good matchup. I enjoyed this one. I gave it a 7.5 out of 10. I think it could have been a bit better. Like, it didn't feel like a stellar contest, but it did feel good, and it felt like a big moment for Myles especially. So, yeah, establishing himself a little bit more. I think that's a job well done. And we see Johnny Gargano going to Johnny Wrestling. Hopefully, we continue to see that now going forward on Friday Night SmackDown. And now that he's found himself, that's the ideal thing that we're looking for here. So hopefully that's the case. Nick, how did you find this one? Johnny and Myles, how good of a match was it for you?
Yeah, as kind of mentioned, we both had pretty high expectations for this one. I think kind of how obvious the winner was, I think might have taken it a bit away, at least for me. But this is definitely the best singles match we've seen from Johnny Gargano in quite some time. I think he might have had a good U.S. title match as well. But just, in a while, obviously he's been doing his little shtick lately where he's just been, laying down on the floor. So not saying a ton, I suppose, but it was refreshing to see him kind of return to old, if you will. But Myles Borne showing up and showing out here as well, definitely showing that he wasn't, just going to be a pushover here. Three born agains to put Johnny Gargano away. Definitely a quality showing from him. Yeah, I really don't have any complaints for it. But just a consistent quality contest, both men kind of showing out here. Yeah, as we kind of mentioned on predictions, and you did just a minute ago as well. I hope this is kind of a relaunching point for Johnny Wrestling to kind of show that he is better than what he has been showing. I know losing your tag partner is obviously a slowdown period for him, but I think he absolutely is much better than when he gets portrayed as, especially lately. So Myles Borne obviously has a very bright future ahead of him as well. Don't need us to tell you that, but yeah, pretty good showing here for his first title defense. And yeah, didn't really have much time to talk about it. Commentary was kind of saying, wonder what's next for Myles. Well, you don't have to wait long. Deion Lennox there of Dark State, who I also have pretty high expectations for as well. So I think that feud could be a ton of fun as well. Looking forward to that one. The next match of the evening has Blake Monroe going up against Tatum Paxley for the Women's North American Championship. And, now that we have kind of this way we came about this was having Blake Monroe steal the title from Tatum, and then they kind of tricked each other into showing up here to kind of get her title back and, kicking off the match here with Blake taunting Tatum with a title in front of her. I thought was a nice way to kind of show that this match could be very personal. But KP, how'd you receive this one?
Yeah, I think they did bring that sort of like personal feeling into this one. We see that with the title presentation at the start of the matchup as well. Blake refusing to give Tatum Paxley the championship, even for that little bit there. She was properly keeping it close to her chest and in the clutches. So, yeah, it's all like getting into the mind of Paxley early on, play those mental games, which was quite good to see actually. But yeah, pretty solid contest here. Liked it. The bits of controversy and a little bit of drama is involved as well. Just a very physical match that had some cool spots. We see an exposed buckle. Well, actually, two of them really. Blake Monroe tearing off both buckles at the same time, and yeah, that leads to an extremely close kick out from Tatum Paxley late on in the contest. There's a really nasty spot on the outside of the ring where Blake Monroe hits a sunset flip powerbomb. That causes Tatum to really bounce off the floor, a really nasty bounce. Both women obviously okay afterwards, but yeah, it looked pretty hellacious at the time. Tatum gets dropped onto the steel ramp on her shoulder very early in the matchup. That sets a bit of a tone for the remainder of the matchup. Sort of like a lot of punishment gets done to the shoulder of Paxley. She's nursing it for quite some time. It's not really until the late stages where we sort of like see that sort of start to simmer off and to ease up a bit. But yeah, Tatum goes through quite a lot here to get the win. I think that's probably one of my main downsides of this matchup. We see Tatum Paxley taking some really big bumps and some big spots here. But Blake Monroe, not so much. So I'm not sure what the reason for that was. But yeah, it very much seemed to be like, Tatum got absolutely, bamboozled out there. But then, yeah, Blake Monroe just sort of like takes it a bit easier in the contest. So yeah, sort of being the one to, inflict the big punishment. Maybe that's a character thing. Maybe it's a personality trait for these two at the moment. Maybe that's what they're trying to do. But yeah, it definitely did seem like it was one sided and like which woman was taking more of the brunt of the offense here. So, I found that quite interesting, quite fascinating to sort of like analyze as I was watching it, but it was fun. It was a really nice contest here. And yeah, I think both women just did a great job. We do see towards the very late stage of this matchup, with those exposed turnbuckles, Blake drops Paxley onto the bottom buckle on the back of her head and then hits that glamour DDT looking to seal the deal. But that's when Paxley kicks out at two and makes her a really, really big kick out moment. Crowd popping for it. So was I, to be fair. Just a really cool spot, to be fair. And, Tatum shows a lot of resilience there to kick out of that count of two. We see that Blake Monroe looking for another Glamour DDT straight afterwards, but Tatum does counter quite nicely, to be fair, into a cemetery drive, and that would seal the win for Paxley. This is my second criticism of the matchup. I do sort of wonder why it was that Tatum was able to kick out of so much, just moves and just offense in this matchup, whereas Blake Monroe, it's one finish and done for her. She does not get the kick out. So maybe they're trying to protect the cemetery drive, which I'm a fan of, to be fair. I like seeing finishes protected, but then obviously we saw the Glamour DDT straight after the turnbuckle thing, which I would have assumed would be a done deal there and then. So, maybe not quite lining up as how I would have expected it to in that sort of sense. Maybe not quite as consistent in the decisions there as I'd like it to have been. But it was a good match. Nonetheless, I really enjoyed this one. I had a great time watching it, and these are some really, really engaging moments. So I liked those individual spots; they were great. So I gave it an 8 out of 10. I liked it. I think there are just a couple of little issues here and there. Just need a little bit of polishing, and this could have been a really amazing matchup between the two ladies. But yeah, it's still really good. It just could have been a little bit better, in my opinion. Nick, what did you make of this one? Do you agree with me in the sense? Am I being maybe a little bit too picky? Reading between the lines too much here? And what are your general thoughts of this matchup?
No, I think you make some fair points. I think Tatum is obviously being sold as that underdog, so it does kind of play into that kind of mentality where she's going to take a lot, kind of like I want to say like a Daniel Bryan-esque kind of. She's always going to take more offense than her opponent. But then that does. I see what you're saying there. Whereas Blake, not so much, which definitely isn't her character, and so she's capable of doing so, but definitely didn't on this evening. I will grant you that. And I was kind of shocked and surprised that Tatum did retain here because of how much offense Blake had dished out. And, as this match is going, I'm like, well, Blake's going to win this title, isn't she? Just kind of felt like that was kind of the way we were going, but alas, it wasn't to be. Blake or Tatum definitely selling the underdog persona, and I thought that was a fun, made for a fun contest. I think these two do have pretty good chemistry though, and I think both of these women are just capable of putting on really consistent matches. So I think this too could potentially be another longer standing rivalry. And with that, it's kind of interesting that this whole Stand and Deliver is supposed to be, like WrestleMania vibe of NXT, and a lot of these rivalries don't feel like they're quite there yet. And I think a lot of that can be kind of an testament to the build or lack thereof of a lot of these things. So make of that what you will. But I think this one could potentially have at least one or two more, and I think we kind of ramp them up by both ends. But I definitely could see what you're saying there. But I too gave this one an 8 out of 10. Quality contest and a nice performance from Tatum, definitely selling the underdog persona there, and we have definitely seen better from Blake. And I definitely see where you're coming from there. And I'm not sure I gave my rating on the last one, the Myles Borne Johnny Gargano match, but just in case I didn't, put that one out there as a 7.5. Getting into the main event of Stand and Deliver, we have Ricky Saints going up against Ethan Page, going up against Tony D'Angelo, and of course going up against Joe Hendry, who is defending his NXT Championship. KP, this one, the build up for this one was kind of just felt like it was a bit thrown together. Obviously, we have the big rivalry or kind of teased rivalry between Saints and Page, but I didn't have a ton of expectations for this one. I felt like the winner was going to be quite obvious. Alas, maybe not so much. What'd you make of it?
Yeah, pretty fun fatal four way. You look at sort of like last year. What do we have? We had a triple threat matchup between Obafemi, Trick Williams, and Javon Evans. So you look at this year where you've got a fatal four way between obviously the men that you've obviously already mentioned. They sort of try and stack the deck here for the NXT Championship towards the end of the year, which I don't think is a bad thing. I quite like it. You get a lot of different styles involved, create some layers, get some cool dynamics, and I feel like we had that as well. Because we see quite an intense matchup here. To be fair, there's a lot going on. And it's quite brutal in parts, actually. Just a little bit here and there, very physical, hard hitting contest. But we also see that sort of entertaining side of things with Ricky Saints and Ethan Page, and their dynamic of working together for the majority of this matchup until ultimately crossing each other, towards the mid stage of the matchup. It makes for some really entertaining moments. And even after they cross each other a little bit, they start working together again. And, they then start to, then get back against each other a bit later on. So it's just a really strange, unique sort of way of going about business here. But I quite liked it. And I had a lot of fun watching their sort of relationship together, working through this matchup and sort of like developing in parts. Like that for me was one of the most intriguing parts of the contest. I really liked that particular bit. But yeah, in terms of just generally everything else, yeah, we see a lot going on. You know, they're fighting all around ringside here. Obviously, there are four of them. There's no countouts, no DQs, all that kind of stuff. So we do see a lot of like outside action as well, and that sort of leads to the late stages too, especially with the very closing moments as well. But in the end here, we do see Tony D'Angelo picking up the victory, which is a huge win for him. Absolutely well deserved. You know, after everything that he's sort of like been through in his NXT time. But yeah, just how we got to that point, though. We see Ethan Page, Ricky Saints brawling at ringside, and Ethan looks to send Saints through the announce table. Tony then hits both of them, sort of like as they're like preparing to go through the table. They're just sort of like on like steel steps that are like stacked against the announce table. And yeah, Tony D'Angelo just literally just runs up both of them, spears them both, and just sends them both crashing through this announce table. He then gets back into the ring and goes back and forth with Joe Hendry for a couple of seconds. And yeah, Tony then hits a spear and follows up with a what we're calling dead to rights now, which is a spine buster. And that'll see him get the victory here and to end, stand, and deliver as the NXT champion, brand new champion as well. So yeah, this one was a lot of fun. Like I said, Tony D'Angelo deserved this one. Vic had like a really awesome way of putting it on the commentary just after the contest has ended. I can't exactly, you know, quote word for word what he said, but just paraphrasing here was like, you know, he's seen everybody sort of like go through a lot that he came up with, sort of the likes of like Carmelo Hayes and Trick Williams and all those guys at the same time, and they've obviously all won the title and left and then gone up to the main roster. So for him to sort of like be, well, it's not so much like lagging behind, but just it shows that like he's gone through different sides and like he's gone through different avenues, and now he's on that path as well. He's become the NXT champion. And he's done so much to sort of like deserve this spot, and I feel really happy for him with that as well. Joe Hendry, obviously, you know, taking the loss here and taking the pinfall as well. Don't see him getting back into the position of being the champion, but I don't think he needs to. He's got a sort of comedic factor that sort of like holds his own. He could be entertaining without the championship. So I'm looking forward to seeing what he does next, especially because I feel like Ethan and Ricky have something there. They can continue with that one quite nicely. We said they'll probably cancel each other out, and that seems to be what they've done. So yeah, I think it's sort of like all right for itself. But what will Tony D do after this? That's the main question. I'm just happy that he got the win because it's absolutely thoroughly deserved. But yeah, fun matchup. Loved it. Good main event. I gave it an 8 out of 10. It could have been better. I wouldn't say it was like an exceptional contest or anything, but it was fun. It was hard hitting. There were entertaining segments in it. So, you know, a few things to enjoy, which is, you know, what I basically got from this one. Nick, how did you rate this main event of Stand and Deliver? Do you think it was the right winner? How do you feel about, you know, the result, generally speaking, the little dynamics in the matchup that are sort of like ever developing? What did you make of it all?
Yeah, I think in the predictions video, we both mentioned Joe Hendry winning. I think a lot of that was just kind of due to the fact that it was so early in his reign. And I kind of shit on his reign so far, and I felt like he didn't really have a great opportunity to kind of prove me wrong. But you know, he's not going to get it. But as you mentioned, I think he will be fine. I think, you know, this is a nice little test run for him. Probably won't be his last title in WWE or NXT, but I do think that you need to figure out, you know, some people are just naturally better as the chaser, and I think maybe he is one of those guys, but I'd love to be proved wrong if he can have maybe a mid-card title or something, you know, seeing how he can do with that, or maybe he'll come back here to Tony D'Angelo. I don't see him dropping a title anytime soon, but yeah, you kind of hit on the main points I had as well. Obviously, the Ricky Ethan stuff, we know they have good chemistry. They proved that time and time again. Can't wait to see them run a few matches going forward. And I think, you know, it'll be interesting to see, you know, you mentioned the last year's main event. Well, all three of those guys are now on the main roster. And not only that, they're going to be on the WrestleMania card. So zero time wasted. And I think that kind of does play a part into this year's Stand and Deliver. You know, you could argue 3 of the 4 guys in this match alone could probably be on main roster by the end of the year. And I don't think we would really blink an eye either. So I think that is kind of an issue, especially comparatively speaking to the women's. The men's does feel like the roster is lacking a bit. bit. But I had, like I said, I didn't have a ton of expectations for this match, but it definitely over delivered in my eyes. It was a ton of fun. They made Tony D'Angelo look like an absolute monster, and definitely the MVP for the men's side for me throughout the evening. Super happy for him, and as you mentioned, well deserved. And kind of looking on it now, looking back on it, it does make sense for him to win that here because the way kind of the path he's been tearing up to get here. This is kind of full circle. He finally got his revenge, and now he's on top of NXT. So good for him. Can't wait to see that kind of going forward. It'd be interesting if Stacks kind of has something to say on that. I know he's kind of busy with the faction now, but it could be an interesting matchup there. But NXT Stand and Deliver, KP. What did you make of it overall? Your overall rating, highlights, lowlights, everything in between, and we'll get this one wrapped up.
Yeah, I tend to, I guess, joke, not so joke. Make sense in a second. About how I sort of feel about Stand and Deliver compared to like WrestleMania, for example. Like, I'm not so much one to really care for main roster stuff for that much recently. So when NXT events come around, I'm extremely excited because I love them. Stand and Deliver is probably one of the events of the year that I always know is going to be consistent. Is it going to be exceptional more often than not? I think this one was good. I think it could have been better. I think a major part of that one is the fact that we were in the factory in St. Louis. I feel like they could have been in the arena that SmackDown was in the night before. I think they could have done that, and they probably would have had a much bigger crowd. I'm sure they could have sold tickets for this one. Maybe it's ticket prices and TKO, at the moment. Obviously, there's a whole situation on that right now. I won't get into any of that. But I feel like the quaintness of the crowd for the factory, setting, I think it was just a little too small. We've seen Sound and Delivers in the past being in arenas and having a much larger fan base there in attendance. And it felt like a WrestleMania-esque, sort of occasion. This one, the matches may have felt like it in terms of who was competing and what they're competing for and things like that. But I feel like we were just one step away from really truly being a Stand and Deliver properly. And the matches were good. Like, we had some very consistent contests here. Lowest rating gave us a 7.5 out of 10. Overall rating comes out as an 8 out of 10. So I can't say the event was bad. It was far from that. It was good. It's just I feel like it did it hit that WrestleMania weekend feeling? Not really. I know Mania's 2 weeks away, but this is what they're doing this year. They're moving it a couple of weeks earlier. That then affected the build in itself as well. You've already hit on that a couple of times. I feel like that's a really big part of this conversation as well, because you do need that sort of elongated feud a little bit, have a few weeks, really get the ground rolling here, and sort of like set the pace. And I feel like, especially like Jacy Jayne, for example, she had such a great title reign and she killed it all the time. And then you get to a position like this where you have like it was literally just a few days. It wasn't even a week to sort of like build up something between her and her opponents. So yeah, obviously there's history between the three of them, but that's just a prime example. Like, we could have done something a bit more than that. Have a couple of weeks, let them build it, let them roll with it, and then put on a really stellar contest in front of a big crowd. But yeah, I'm babbling. My highlight of the night: Los Americanos and the Vanity Project. Low of the night, probably, unfortunately, Johnny Gargano and Myles Borne. But that wasn't a bad match. That's just what comes out as the lowest rating. I'm not saying it's bad, just that was the lowest of the good bunch. So, yeah, not a bad Sound and Deliver. Could have been better. Just didn't have that feeling. You know what I mean? I think that's fair to say. Nick, how did you rate this one? Do you kind of agree where I'm coming from? Do you feel like it could have been, up at that level if it was in a different arena? Or do you think maybe this was probably the ceiling for this event?
No, absolutely. And as you mentioned all the time, like, I know NXT is your baby, so your expectations are always going to be, very, very high. And I think just a lot of what we saw here can absolutely, I didn't once say, oh, wow, the crowd really made that match. And I feel like at Stand and Deliver, that's always, or Takeover, that was always one of the big things for it. It had going for it. The crowd was always phenomenal. And the events were definitely, or the venues were definitely bigger than that of what we saw last night. So it definitely, I think, plays a part. I think the other big part is absolutely that I've already hit on, you hit on as well, is the build. And I think we mentioned that on the predictions video as well. A lot of these contests, we didn't even know the match that was going to take place before this last Tuesday. So that's very uncharacteristic of NXT and Stand and Deliver as a whole. So, yeah, I don't think they could have definitely did better with that. I'm sure maybe some of that could be to the NXT GM changing. Maybe that forced them to shuffle some cards. I'm not really sure. But regardless, definitely not a terrible event. Just not that super great event that we typically expect from the biggest NXT PLE of the year. This one to me just kind of came across as a standard NXT, maybe a notch above, but definitely not those high expectations that we typically expect from these. Highlight for me was Zaria and Soul. Like I said, Zaria made absolutely out to be a monster here, and similarly, in a very similar light, that of Tony D'Angelo. I thought he really made out looking good here, and can't wait to see kind of where he takes that NXT title from here. So also have a new NXT champion in Lola. I thought that was a quality contest as well. So lots of, I think the awkward part about this whole thing is lots of things it feels like we're probably going to get better from here, and typically, this event's supposed to be the culmination, the WrestleMania, if you will, of a lot of those things, and unfortunately it just didn't feel the vibe. So not a bad contest, still leagues better than I did SmackDown just a couple of nights ago. It's still leagues better than that, so make of that what you will. Still a nice breath of fresh air here was Stand and Deliver, but overall for me an 8.25. So a very quality event, just not quite to the level that we typically expect. But with that, enough from us over here at The Push. What did you make of Stand and Deliver? We'd love to hear from you in the comments below. As always, don't forget to hit that like and subscribe button, as it does help us out over here at The Push. But until next time, this has been The Push with Nick and KP. We'll see you soon. Take care.